Welcome everyone. Happy Saturday and good morning. So today's session will be focusing on building serverless applications on AWS using SAM, and we'll be discussing about how to write your infrastructure as code using a real world example, and we'll be covering a few AWS resources in this example. So the idea is that we want to find a way that we can write the code and then also write the infrastructure along with the code and deploying it together. So that being said, we can just quickly go through a small slide. So that's the goal of this session, to build applications using SAM. So before we go into what is SAM, right, let me just share of how some of the teams do deploy things to AWS. So let's say you're writing a serverless application, maybe it's Lambda or a DynamoDB, and usually go to console, configure your Lambda, upload your source code, and you test it in that fashion. You still have your source code checked in somewhere, but at least the Lambda may or may not be right. So the idea is that SAM provides a capability where you um, put your infrastructure as well as your code in one place, and then through SAM deploy both of them together. Right. So what exactly is SAM? So it stands for Serverless Application Model. It's an open source framework used to build serverless applications, and that's what it means. It's an open source. So yeah, you can contribute to SAM if you want. Um, so it consists of two things. First one is a template, and second one is a CLI. So template is like a declarative way to write your infrastructure. For instance, I want to say that I want to create a Lambda, or I want to create an API gateway. So then you do that in a template, right? And the way you interact with the template is through a CLI. Okay. So those are the two things that are provided by SAM, and there are a lot of things that are covered in the CLI. So we'll hopefully touch a lot of those sections today, right? Some of the advantages are, I think we all know the pain of going through manual deployments in console, right? There's always going to be a mismatch between if you change something in the console and the code is not, matching that change, and there are issues with, the sync. So you can eliminate manual deployments. Everything goes through your code, or probably if you have a version control system, everything goes to that. Right? You have one place to manage all related AWS resources. So for instance, you are building an application where you have a bunch of resources. You want to have an API gateway, a Lambda, DynamoDB, an SQS, etc. And it would be hard to manage if you have everything inside the console and you don't have one single place where you can manage everything, and you can also manage the dependencies. So in case if you change one of those resources and you have a corresponding change on the other resource, then at least the single place helps with managing that dependency, right? Next is build and deploy core and infrastructure as one. So this is again very powerful. Your code changes and infrastructure changes go hand in hand. Again, helps to reduce a lot of manual troubleshooting that is involved with the while syncing your code and your infrastructure. SAM also offers local debugging and testing. So usually you would end up with writing a piece of code and then you deploy to AWS and then you test it on the cloud, right? There are some disadvantages to that. You don't want to, impact your live traffic. And by live traffic, it could be anything, right? Your development environment, or your staging environment, or your production. Live traffic meaning you don't want to impact anything that's already out there. So SAM provides a way to locally test your resources or your serverless applications. And it's an extension to CloudFormation. So CloudFormation, if you're not aware, that is the backbone service by AWS. SAM is an extension to that. CloudFormation is the one which is, managing your resources for you, and SAM is on sitting on top of it. So there may be some instances in the session that I'll probably call it out that this is nothing specific to SAM, but it's CloudFormation. But if you're not aware of CloudFormation, then that's the main backbone service by AWS, which is managing your infrastructure as code. and SAM has some a lot of extensions to that CloudFormation service. SAM itself won't be shown on the AWS console. You won't be able to see a SAM as a resource. You'll be able to see a CloudFormation as the resource. Um, Keep it that way. So in today's demo, we're going to create two resources, two serverless apps. One is an API gateway and one is a Lambda function. The app will be simple, but it will have some production grade settings that we'll go through the session. And essentially, we'll today focus on three requests from the API gateway to Lambda: get, put, and post and put. And we'll go through what are the options we have in SAM through which you can make the infrastructure more manageable, configurable, uh, easily deployable, and locally testable. Right. To get started, right? You just want to install SAM CLI first. So going here, take you to this page, and you have instructions on installing SAM CLI for your operating systems. I already have that installed, so I'm not going to go to the links, but this is the link where you go and install how to install SAM CLI. So maybe for Windows, you have an installer, Mac OS, you do it through Homebrew. Linux, you may have a tar or some other file that can use and extract. So with that, let's go through today's source code first and see what we are going to build. Right. So as you can see, I'm in my editor and I've created a small Lambda function, which is essentially this function, which is the handler. It's going to accept an event. Because if you are used to writing Lambda function, you know that Lambda function accepts an event. That event could be anything. It could be an API gateway event, an SQS event, a DynamoDB stream, etc. That event is generic, and what you do with that event is inside your source code. So what we have today is we are going to build an API gateway and a Lambda function to handle the events from the API gateway. So in here, code is simple. You have your event, and based on which type of HTTP method it is, we're going to change the response a little bit. We're going to build a response which says I want to send the status code accordingly. I want to build a body, and inside the body, I'm just sending that message, which is which method was invoked. So it's very simple, but yeah, you can extend this to whatever you want. You may also have imports about your AWS SDK. You want to call DynamoDB, you can do that. But for the demonstration purposes, we can use that and see how you can make changes onto this template, onto the source code, and see how it builds, takes that change and deploys it to your Lambda, to your API gateway, just by changing something here. Okay. So as I mentioned earlier, we have two things into a SAM. We have the template reference and we have a SAM CLI. And I'll just quickly show you what the SAM CLI is. If you now hold on. Oops. All right. So if you have installed it correctly, you can just type SAM version. It'll give you the version that is installed, and this means that the SAM CLI has been installed correctly. Right. So the template reference is the one where we place our infrastructure in a declarative way, and the template reference is nothing but a YAML formatted file that you have to put as part of your source code. So I'm going to create a template file here. You can name it anything, but I'm going to name it as a template.yaml because this is the name that SAM CLI will default to. So I don't have to pass in extra parameter to specify the file name. But if you have a separate file name or you have it somewhere else, then that's fine. You can just give the path to that file and it should work just fine. Okay. So in here, how do we start writing? What things go into a template? So if you go to Google and you just search for SAM specification and go into some template anatomy, you will be taken to this page. You can see that these are some of the tags that you can use to write your infrastructure. We'll go through some of them in today's session, but we'll just skim through all of these right now to get you an understanding of what of these each of these mean. Right. So the first one is that it's a transform statement, and this is a static string. So why is this important? Earlier, I mentioned that every SAM template is a CloudFormation template. So it's just an extension to CloudFormation. So it means that to let the SAM CLI know that this is not a CloudFormation template, but this is a SAM template, a transform statement is needed. If you don't specify this, then SAM CLI will still work with a CloudFormation template. CloudFormation template has some of these parameters, not all of them. The CloudFormation template does have some of these tags, not all of them. So this is going to tell the CLI that this template that you are seeing is actually a SAM template and not a CloudFormation template. All right. So that's the transform statement. Next is we'll go to the resources first because this is the only mandatory tag that needs to be there in the template. This resources is the place where you specify all your AWS resources. Okay. And if open this section, you'll see that there are a bunch of AWS resources that I can create. So I can create an API, which is an API gateway. I can create a function, which is Lambda function, and we're going to use these today. But these are just specific to SAM. They are not specific to um, CloudFormation, which means that if you want to create a DynamoDB table, okay, so then those are nothing but CloudFormation. That's actually has nothing to do with SAM. It's just that you can also use SAM to write your CloudFormation resources. So I'll just quickly take you to that tour of how you can write any, how you can create any AWS resource through CloudFormation and also through SAM. So which means, oh, sorry. So in here, if you go to CloudFormation, you'll see that under the same template reference, resource, and property reference, you'll see that there are a lot of almost everything that is offered on AWS. You can have your um, app runner, you have your Athena, you have your CloudFront, you have CloudFormation again, you have Chatbot, CloudTrail, CloudWatch, IAM. Um, Everything that is offered on AWS can be configured in this template. It's just that SAM changed the name a little bit. So what you see on CloudFormation as for instance, you see a Lambda over here. Yep, that is nothing but a serverless function when you say that this is a CloudFormation template. But everything goes under resources. So this is the only required tag that you need to add in your template. Description is nothing but a string of what the template is. Metadata is just more information, so a bunch of more tags about your template. We'll go through the parameters mappings today, and then outputs are something that if you have multiple templates, right? If you have one set of services as one app, you have another set of services as another app. You can even have a reference from one template to another. So in case you have a large infrastructure and you want to break your templates down, then you can have two separate templates, and then you can use this output section to output something from one template, import into another. So for that, that's the output section. So with that, let's get started on writing some of the infrastructure that we are going to build today. So I'll just copy the transform statement first. All right, that's my transform statement. The next step is I want to write a resources section, because this is essentially where I'm going to define my infrastructure. So under resources, I'm going to start with writing the Lambda function, the one that is going to point to this index.js, right? For that, I'm going to say you have to give that resource some identifier, a string. So it's just a naming that you have to say. So I'm going to say this is going to be a demo Lambda function. It could be any string. It's just a reference to what this is. The type tag will say what is the type of this resource. In our case, this is going to be the Lambda function. So if I go here, this is nothing but AWS : serverless : function. Okay. And each type will also have a property. So these properties are nothing but most of these properties will be something that you can see on your on your console. So for instance, if you go to console, you can see that when you create a Lambda, you are asked a bunch of questions about the information. Okay, what is the runtime of that Lambda function, right? Whether it's Java runtime, a Node runtime, Python, Ruby, the memory that you want to allocate to your function, your the handler path to your handler. In our case, this is going to be index, but that path, what is that path? Where and then there's a function code section where you actually upload your code through either a zip or a jar file. So if you're used to Lambda, you'll be able to see that. Right. So here we are also going to put those information declaratively. So for the first one is I'm going to say the runtime. So since this is a Node.js application, I'm going to say this is going to be Node.js 14.x. And I'm not making this up. It's just that I'm aware of these things. So, but they can always go to serverless function. And here you can see that there are a bunch of properties that you can use. And under click on that runtime property, and it'll take you this section where it says this is the identifier that the function's runtime. If I click on that, and here these are the identifiers that you can use. So for Node.js, it's this. Python, these are the options. Ruby, these are the options. Java, it's over here. So that's how you can start writing your template over here. So in this example, we are going to say my runtime is going to be Node.js 14. The handler section. So my handler is going to be my index. Inside my index file, it's going to be the handler function, right? The handler JavaScript function. So I'm just going to say this is going to be my index.handler. And the third one is a code URI. So this one is an important one. This one is going to specify SAM where this template should go and look for my source code. Essentially, where you should go to find your index.handler. And this could be a couple of things. This could be an S3 URL. All right. So if you have a pre-uploaded function, you can specify the S3 URL directly. It also accepts a local path. In our case, we are going to use the local path because essentially we don't want to upload something first and then put that code URI here. We want to make sure that it goes together. Any change on the template or the code has to be detected by the CLI. So in our case, we'll be using the local option. But these are the two ways that you can use the code URI. So code URI is going to be relative to your template's path in your source code. Right now, my template is under the root of my project. So the code URI is going to be in reference to my template YAML file. In our case, this is under SRC. So I'm just going to say this is going to be under SRC. Or another way is if I do something like says that I want to start everything from the root, then you give that, but then I'll have to say my handler is inside SRC. All right. It's just the code URI is going to be relative to the template. Sorry, yeah, go ahead.
It's absolute part of your handler.
Your not the handler. It's more like the template YAML file. Where what is the relate? So if I put template into, let's say you have an infra directory and then you put your template inside there, then your code URI is going to be relative to the template YAML.
Okay.
Wherever you specify YAML, then maybe in that case you'll have to do something like this. You know. Sorry, okay. Something like this.
Yeah. Path for the template.
Right. Right. All right. So these are the three main properties, and these are, I think, enough for us to even start experimenting with the CLI now. So we are going to say that I want to create a Lambda function. My runtime is going to be Node.js. My handler is index.handler, and I want you to find my handler from under SRC. If it was inside SRC, if inside you have a bunch of other directories, then you can write it over here or over here relative to your source. Okay. So let's head over to terminal. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
I'm sorry. Can you go back to the configuration? Why does it need code URL, the template YML's path? Because it will scan from the template YML only.
Sorry, come in. I didn't get that.
Sorry, I am asking in the demo lambda function in properties, why do you need to pass code URI?
Oh, so you have the code URI is because so let's say you don't pass this. Okay. You try to deploy through SAM. The CLI won't know where to go and find your index handler. Where exactly is your index handler? It doesn't know.
Okay. Then it should be the path for the your source code, not to the template.yml.
It is part of the source code, but relative to your template.
Okay.
So if I put the template inside some other directory, then that code URI needs to change. This is because right now my SRC and template are at the same level. That's why I'm saying that inside my SRC. Otherwise, it could be if my template was not at the root, then this could change. It's just your URI has to be relative to where your template is in your project. So there are some teams who prefer having an infrastructure and then some other directories, and then you have a template there. Then your handler is not going to have all those paths. Usually, it's not a good practice to have that in the handler. So then your code URI is going to help you get to that handler.
Okay.
It's just a relative directory from where you want to look for your handler from the template YAML file.
Okay.
Right. So inside your terminal, we are going to start using some of the SAM commands. And the first one we take a look at is SAM build. So I'm going to run this and we're going to see what it actually does, right? When you run SAM build, does a couple of things. One is that it's going to building the code URI. And here, if you see now, it's able to identify that this is where, oops, sorry. Come on. This is where my source is. So because this was the path till my template file, it was able to extract that. And then it says it's under SRC. This is my runtime. The functions, what I'm going to declare are demo lambda function, right? We'll come to this later because right now we don't have a package JSON, but we'll do that later. Okay. And then it's going to running the npm builder, which is saying essentially let's copy your source code to a temporary directory, and that's directory is over here. So it's going to package by mean resolve dependencies. In our case, we don't have any dependencies at the moment in our index.js, so that's okay. But it's going to resolve those dependencies, then put everything under the build directory under .aws sam. So if I go into the editor, I'm going to see a .aws sam directory created under build. It's going to create this demo lambda function, which is essentially the same name that I've given here. And because I have given my code URI as src, so now it's going to take everything from my demo lambda function and put that over here. So if I have a bunch of JS files, all the directories inside my src, then all of these will be under this directory demo lambda function. So that's essentially now from this point onward, SAM CLI is going to look at this directory under AWS SAM build, this directory to find my source code. And it has also created a template YAML for reference, for its reference. And if you see now, it has created a bunch of other um, properties. One is code URI has now changed to this because this is the path from which, from under SAM, from under build, from where it is going to find your code. It's just a SAM specific thing. We don't care about what goes inside here. It's just I wanted to show you what it does when you do a SAM build. Okay, it's just going to build stuff, and by me build I mean copy your source code to a temporary directory and probably change the URI. So the next one is SAM package. The SAM package command is going to now take your template, take your built source code, uh, and then upload that to S3, and maybe in our case it's just going to upload that to S3. But if you have some other dependencies, it's going to resolve everything against the target AWS environment. So package is nothing but more like resolving the dependencies in respect to AWS. So we go to package. Under package, I want to say that, and the package command is going to spit out a YAML formatted template again with those resolved dependencies. So we'll see that in a moment. So it can either spit out everything on the terminal, or you can specify a file where it can extract or output all those information. So I'm going to say that I'm going to package, and I'm going to say the output template file is going to be, you can name it anything, any path. I'm just going to say output YAML. Okay. It does expect you to have your credentials. So I'm going to use one credential, then I'm have it locally in my profile. If you have exported them in your terminal, then you don't have to specify that, it will take that. But in my case, I'm just going to use a profile to do that. Hold on. Oops. Okay, have a profile, and you also have to specify path to S3, a bucket where it will go and upload your artifacts. Or you can say that we want you to figure out some bucket for me. So we are going to do that option. I don't have an S3 bucket, so I'm just going to say to resolve S3. And I think that's it. Let's see if that works. Yeah, went through. So it says it has created a bucket for me, which is essentially this. Okay. And it also says that you can specify it by using this property explicitly. It has uploaded the artifacts, and it says the template file has been created. So now the next step is taking that and deploying to AWS. So this next step, the SAM deploy command is going to actually go and deploy your template and your source code. Before that, let's go through this output template file and see what SAM has done in the package command. So go into editor, an output template YAML created. And as you can see, it has created your code URI, which is essentially you have uploaded that to S3. So it has taken your source code from your local copy and was able to deploy it to S3. Okay, so what this means is that if you have a CI/CD, then this is very helpful, where you can do a SAM build first, SAM package, and then deploy is maybe somewhere else, right? You don't. Sometimes you have your build as a separate, job in your CI, and you have to deploy a separate job. That's almost all the time. So this helps to segregate that. When you do that, you can still work with a local copy of your code. You can package it and then have SAM deploy it wherever you want, right? So that's why the SAM package command is important. If you build a CI, you can always go to from SAM build, you can directly go to SAM deploy, and that's one way. But then you won't have that intermediate step. If you want to reuse your code from your S3 bucket or from one place, then you SAM package gives you that capability. But you can always go from SAM build to SAM deploy directly, in which case it will work based on a local copy, which is inside AWS SAM build. It can just take this and deploy to AWS. That's also one way. But I just wanted to show you SAM package and some of the use cases through in which a SAM package in between SAM build and SAM deploy can help. So now we're going to do SAM deploy. So SAM deploy expects that you provide a stack name. A stack name is specific to not specific to SAM. It's just a Cloudformation thing where it will create a Cloudformation template, Cloudformation stack with a bunch of resources. Right now, it's just going to be a Lambda function. So let's say stack name. I'm going to say it's as a AWS demo, or maybe demo stack, right? The other things that are required. So because we have changed the templates files location now, we don't want to take the one that was template.yaml. This is the one that we want to deploy. So we also have to specify the path to that template file, which is output YAML file. Okay. So I want to deploy this. This is the name of my stack to be created. This is the template file. And again, my credentials. And in which region do I want to deploy? Well, in which AWS region I want to deploy this infrastructure. So I'm going to deploy it to the Mumbai region, which is AP South 1. Okay. All right. let's see what happens. Okay, so this is going to fail, and the reason is that we have not given a capability. So what exactly is a capability when you use the SAM deploy command? So if you know, in AWS, everything works on permissions, right? You have to give permissions in your IAM to every resource that you create, right? What that resource is supposed to have as a permission, right? If you see in our template, I've not specified any sort of thing, right? I'm just specifying a function. I'm not even what are the permissions my function is supposed to have, right? Usually when you do it through console, in almost all the resources, you have an option to select from the console whether you want AWS to create the IAM role for you. If you're used to using the console, it will tell you that if you want AWS to create the role for you. So that is exactly what that capability means. So when it says capability IAM, and we'll go through what are the other options. So to do that, we just do SAM deploy help, and the help is going to give you all the options that you can use. Okay. In our case, the capabilities is the option that is missing in our command. It says there are two options, two valid values over here. One is the capability I am, one is the capability named I am. So what is a named IAM? So named IAM is something when you have IAM as a resource specified in your template. If you don't want AWS to create the permissions for you, if you want to maintain the permissions within the template itself, then just like you created a Lambda function, you would probably create an IAM resource, and you want to create a named resource instead of AWS creating the permission for you. So in that case, you have to specify that I want you to create a named IAM resource and not just IAM. So that's the two values that you have to specify to let the CLI know how do you want to create the permissions. So in our case, we are just going to use the IAM because we want AWS to create those roles or permissions for us. We don't want to do it as part of our template. Not for the demo purposes at least, but usually enterprise projects would require you to write an IAM role within the template, in which case you will have to use this option. I'm going to clear the screen. Any questions until now? Okay, capabilities. And now let's see if it works. Also prints a couple of metadata from your template. So it's going to give you the stack name, region where you're deploying, confirming chain set. I'll explain that what means in a bit. S3 bucket we haven't specified. Essentially, we don't need because S3 has been resolved in the SAM package command. But if we didn't have a SAM package command, then it would either create an S3 bucket for you, or you can specify the S3 bucket name, which will be displayed here. And these are the capabilities that we have specified. And it is also going to print everything that as it happens in the cloud. So it has said that a chain set has been detected, and because it's a fresh stack, it has detected that I want to add these two resources. So as you can see, this is the logical resource ID that we have specified in our template. This is not something that we have specified, but because of the capabilities, it is now going to create an IAM role for me as well, which is for my Lambda function. Okay, it created a chain set, and then these are the events that happen in the cloud, right? It has created an IAM role first, and then it has created the Lambda function, and then it has created the Cloudformation stack. Okay, so if we go into the cloud now, we're going to management console, and we'll go through each of them together. Let's go to Cloudformation first to see if a stack has been created named SAM demo. SAM demo stack is what it's created, which is created right now. It's under Cloudformation. So this is again Cloudformation. It's nothing related to SAM, because I mentioned SAM is essentially going to create a stack for you. Under resources now, we have two resources. One is your function, its role, right? I click on this function. It's going to go to Lambda management console. I'm going to open that function. This is essentially my function. And if you see, this is my code, the same code that we had in our editor. Go back to CloudFormation, or you can just go to Lambda again, go to configurations. And if I go to permissions, it has created a role. And if you see, this is the same role, which is ending in NACQ over here, NACQ. So it has given the same basic execution role. This is the same role that is created when from the console you say that I want AWS to create my resource, my permissions. It's the same thing. Any questions until now? So essentially, we have used our source code and we have created a template. We have deployed it to AWS, and we can essentially use that function going forward, or we can just make a change and we can see that we can do those changes as well. We can even see those changes.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I see you have specified region in the command line. Is there a particular reason for it? Shouldn't we
So
expect it from
yes,
OpenAI?
that is a good question. So that's actually I'd say it's like a it's more like a SAM specified things. I have so there are two things. One, if you export your credentials in your terminal or in your other shell, ideally we do not need to specify a region, because if you say I want to export my region as AWS underscore region, then you can specify your region. In which case I don't need to specify in the CLI. But that is something that is like I think it's a bug or something. You have to specify the region always.
I see. I was under the impression it should ideally pick up it from profile as well.
Profile, yes. So in my profile, I have specified the region. Yes, that is a good question, but it doesn't pick up. So it's a bug in the CLI at the
I see.
moment. Maybe they'll fix that.
I see.
So
Thanks.
we do have to specify that region, at least in the deploy command.
I had another question earlier, but I guess I now know the answer. You were saying that you can have package and deploy as two separate stages in the pipeline, and in that case, I'm assuming the intermediate deployment YAML we created that needs to be artifact of package then, right? Then which needs to be transferred to deploy
Yes,
page.
yes.
Okay.
So yeah, so if you have, let's say you have a headless CLI like GitHub, then you won't need, because if you have just jobs one after the other, then you'll probably have the output template file in your container. But if you are using something like Bitbucket, and then you have different stages where you have to, from one stage you want to export something to the other stage, then yes, in that case, one of the exports would be your output template file, which you'll have to give to the SAM deploy command that is going to be executed in the other stage. But the advantage of the SAM package is there that now you don't have to also export your source code, because that is already there in S3 from the package command. So imagine if you don't have a package command, then what you'll have to do is, if you go from SAM build to SAM deploy directly, and if you have two separate jobs in your pipeline, for instance in Bitbucket, then as part of the first job, in addition to the output template file, you'll also have to export your source code, either zip or uh, in some other way, so that your next stage can have it. So that SAM package command is going to help you eliminate that.
That's interesting. That actually then gives me another question.
Yeah.
How do you maintain different version of your artifact? Like for example, yesterday I had one deployment, today I have another, and tomorrow I'll have another. How do you maintain the version of the code? Do you use S3's version capability
So it's
or?
up to you. So there are a couple of things, and it also depends on the service that you are using. In our case, if you have Lambda also has versions in place, right? If you see, Lambda has a version and an alias that you can specify to maintain versions in Lambda. um, you also have S3 as versions capability, you can use that. And if not, then you can just straight away, because now if you do through SAM as an infrastructure, your git commits are going to be version control. So each git commit can also be one version, if you see it that way. You can even name your S3 files to the same as a commit ID if you want to maintain it that way.
Right, but we wouldn't check in that intermediate deploy file, right?
That's not needed, right? As long as that file is supposed, because that would not so in case you want to maintain a single name for your package, then you can put that in your when on your package command that I want to, but usually that's not the case, right? So you don't care about what is the name of that file, right? All you care about is that this is where my source code is for this deployment. You get,
Right, right. But sorry, it might be a little outside the scope of
okay,
this discussion. I was thinking, how do I know what exactly what version of code is deployed on what environment if we do it like this? But yeah, I mean, we can take it later
okay.
as well. That's
Yeah, let's yeah, I can get back to if you have time at the end, or you know, but yeah, yeah, like there are some options that you can use, but it's not specific to SAM, to be honest.
I agree. I agree.
All right. So so now if I let's
A
quickly
related question might also be that, say suppose if I have to roll back my versions, right?
yes.
In case there's a faulty deployment or I have to go back a few versions, then how do I go that? How do I get those versions?
So I'm not sure
I
if you
think
can.
that is also something which Reese is trying to hint at.
Yes. So to that, I'm not sure if you can do that through SAM commands. Probably it's something that you do outside of SAM. And I'm just talking that from whatever I've worked on SAM. It is essentially similar to like your Git commits, right? How do you roll back your commit? You either have a revert commit or you can revert your changes.
I guess because it does create CloudFormation stack set and you can roll back CloudFormation, you can probably.
That you can. So yeah, you can use that. But then again, I've never done that. Usually it's like, because then your infrastructure is again out of sync from your source code, which is committed to your GitHub repository. Because if you do it through CloudFormation, just you're not going to go back and change your source code, which was deployed along with that
Yeah.
version.
Probably a good topic for another
Yeah,
time. Wise.
right. So that being said, let's make a small change over here. Let's print some environment variables, because that's something that again in a production application we have. Usually we have an environment variable which is specified to our template, or sorry, a lambda, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change my template a little bit, and now I'm going to say I want to add my environment. Once again, this is because it's I remember these settings, but if you don't remember, you can always go to your sorry, resource properties. Going back to oops, AWS SAM function reference. And here you can say that I have an environment as a property. So I'm not going to go through that console just because short to time constraint, and I remember these things. That's why. Otherwise, you can always go there. Variables are going to be. I want to add two variables. One is usually we have like a logging level. What is the logging level I want to deploy? So normally you want to deploy your application to a couple of environments, right? You have a dev environment, you have a staging, you have a production. So I'm just going to use couple of mostly used environment variables and see how we can use the same template to use for all your environments. So variables is going to be, let's say a log underscore level. I'm going to name this as debug, for instance. Other is, let's say you want to interface with an external database. Okay. Well, maybe maybe we are not going to create this database. I'm just going to say this is the URL. I'm not going to make any code changes. I'm just going to go ahead and print these environment variables in my source code. And that's my database URL, and that's my log level. Okay. So in order to see this in action, also have to create an API gateway. But let's just see that if I just do this, and if I run those three commands, it's going to update my source code. I'm going to say clear SAM build. Okay. SAM package. All right, and then Oops. Deploy. So now you'll see something interesting when now it tries to deploy the stack. Okay, so that has succeeded. If you scroll up, it's going to start creating a change set. Change set is essentially nothing but what are you changing as part of your SAM deploy command. So in this case, earlier we had two things, which was an add, that we are going to add a function and a role. But in this case, it has detected that there's no change to the function's permission. So it's just going to say, I'm going to modify my function because that's the only resource that has changed. And that's the only resource that has been updated. So it has not changed anything on the role because it has detected that this stack already exists. Okay. If I go into the console now, go into Lambda, I'm just going to, there's no here, refresh here. And if I go into that, so as you can see, I now have, so I had uncommented this line, which is there. And if I go into configuration, go into environment variables, these are the name variables that we defined. Okay. All right. So now let's get started with another resource, which is the API gateway, which is going to interface with our Lambda function. So for that, I'm going to say demo API. Again, a logical name. It's this type. Going to be AWS. Yeah, right. Properties. Now we don't need many properties in the API sections. I'm just going to write the stage name. If you are aware of API gateway, you when you want to have a URL to test, you have to provide a stage where you want to deploy that, right? I'm just going to say a stage name. I'm going to say that is dev for now. Okay. So how do you tie these up, right? How do you tie your API to Lambda? Because essentially what we need is we want to consume three events. One is a HTTP get method, one a post method, one a put method. So that can be handled through the events property in your Lambda function. So I'm going to say my Lambda function is going to expect events, and the events is nothing but a map. So again, a logical name, which is going to say a get event. Inside the get event, this is going to be of type. This could be anything. This could be, let's say, an S3 event or maybe SQS event, right? So these types, again, these are probably enums that you can go into same documentation. And if you go to events, that's the event source. You can see the properties are going to be type string, and these are all S3, SNS, kinases, etc., etc. And API is the API gateway. And you can also go through example how it's used. So this is how it's used. You can specify an event name, type, and then these are the properties. Okay, the name type is going to be API. Then property, I'm going to say it's going to accept it. The event is going to be at the path of. I'm just going to say orders, just to say it's like an order resource to get orders. Second is the method that I want to capture is get, and it's a type of API. But let's say you have multiple APIs, right? You have bunch of other APIs. Which API to tie it to, right? So you can say REST API ID, and this is where one intrinsic function comes into place, which is available in Cloudformation template and also in SAM template by extension. So this function starts with a reference, which is a ref essentially, and you specify the logical ID which is inside your function. In our case, this is going to be a demo API. Okay, that like that. Again, there is an error because this is nothing but YAML doesn't like that, so I'm just going to add it in the next line. So that's how you have your reference. If you see in the example, that's essentially how it has done as well. So now we have an event and we have a, this is how you tie two things together through a ref. There are other ways that you can tie. We'll go through the intrinsic functions in a moment, but for now, the reference is going to accept the logical ID. Okay, I'm just going to copy that and then add those other two events. So now the next one is I want to do a put event onto the orders path. Method is put. For now, I'm not going to write the model, which is going to accept the essentially the body, just to demonstrate that how the events are captured and how the API will be created. But you can write the models under demo APIs. So there is a models property, which is nothing but you can declare your models over here, and then you can use that. If time permits, it'll go through that as well. And then again that, and then the last one is post event post, right? So this looks good to me, and I'm going to deploy that and see if it works.
Kush, I think we are missing a colon on line number 6, just before API.
Oh yeah, good catch. Thanks. Um, let's see what happens if I do this. Okay. I want to show you another command in SAM that you can use to detect these issues. It won't do here, but in when you try to package, it will give you an error. For instance, let's say package. Oh, sorry. Then maybe let's deploy. Let's try deploying. There is one command in SAM which will help you catch these errors beforehand, before you go through all these commands and before even you, you know, make changes
I
to
was
your
asking
stack.
about in build page, will you
No,
able to
it
catch
build, not in build. It's usually in the deploy stage that it is, because in build and package, it's essentially just going to work with your source code,
with
which is just packaging the code and then taking the code to S3, etc. So deploy is the one that does those creation of resources, and that's where it should fail.
actually environment creation happens only in
Deploy,
deployment?
yes. Before that, it's just either local or resolving some references to in respect to S3.
Okay.
I'm going to cut this out, do it again. Or let's say I do something like this. Okay, add it here. Maybe this was not the good example. Let's say I add something which is not there in the specification. Again, run these three commands. SAM build. Now, okay, I take it back. It's the SAM build that will detect that change. But if you see, it's an invalid resource exception, and it says property environment variables not defined for resource of the type function. Right. So if you don't want to do that, there is another command which is SAM validate, and for some reason it also expects the profile to be there. I think it's also going to check some permissions, and that's why it expects the profile. I'm not really sure why that profile is needed, but it does expect, so I'm going to use that. If you do SAM validate, it's going to validate the template against the specification. So now you get that error and you have this line. So if I change that now, go back, fix that. If I do SAM validate, then you'll able to see that it'll pass. Yep, there you go. So now I say it's a valid SAM template. So let's deploy these quickly. Build. Okay. So while we wait for that to happen. Okay, I think it's quick. So now you can see it has created a bunch of other resources, and let it complete, and we'll see what it has done so far. So now if you see what it has detected is a change set, and in here I cannot see my function because essentially we have not changed anything in the function. What we have done is that we have created a REST API, an API gateway, and these are the permissions that will be added to my function. It won't change the function, it's just going to create some more permissions on the function to allow events to come from API gateway. So it has created these three Lambda permission. Okay. It's also created a deployment and a stage. These are specific to API gateway. When you create a stage and a deployment to create those resources. So as you can see, you don't have to create these separate resources inside your template. And I think Shirish, you asked that question if you for rollbacks, right? Now that I see this, maybe this is the resource that you would have to explicitly define in your template and maybe use that to do rollbacks.
I see. I see.
So it has created these resources for us, and it has updated my stack. So if I go now to my um, stack, if I nope, that's my stack, demo stack. If I refresh, see the one API gateway and everything has been created. And if I go to demo API, okay, so I have my orders, I have my get post, I go to stages, I have my dev stage. And if I click on this link, yeah, of course it's going to say that, but if I say /orders, because that's the path that we have, and there we go. This is coming from our source code, which is saying, if I get a I want to get method call, my response code is going to be 200, which is here. That's my status code, and then that's my message, and that's what you get here. So that works. So we have now one API gateway, one Lambda function interacting with each other uh, using SAM template. Any questions until now?
No.
Okay.
Clear.
Sorry, did you have or did you not have?
No, it's clear.
Okay. And since we have invoked that, we can also see that if I check CloudWatch now, I think it's a SAM demo stack. Okay. The first invocation, see, you have the database URL and your logging level specified, which we printed as part of our execution. So that's good, right? Now we have a working example of both API and your function. But then this is usually in production application, we won't have separate environments, right? We want to deploy your code to multiple environments, right? And if you see right now, we have environments defined. Maybe database URLs are different for each environment. Maybe log level is different, right? So how do we, have a template and deploy to different environments, right? One option is I can create a separate template itself, a dev template, a production template, a staging template. Have the same things and change these variables over there, right? And then in the SAM commands, you can always specify depending on the target environment, whether it's CI or CDI or whatever, you can take the target environment and then put that in your CLI. You want to replace that with a name. That's one way. Another way is that's again the downside is that you'll have to now keep sync between your different infrastructure files. All of the YAMLs may not be the same. You have to do that manually. So another that brings us to another property in the template that you can use at the root level. That is the parameters. Parameter section is essentially something which is an input to your template. It's more like if you want to pass something to the template, then you can use the parameter section. The parameters again a logical name you have to specify. I'm going to say this is going to be my logging level. Okay, and then I'm going to say this is a type of a string. All right. Similarly, database, I'm just going to say, okay, database URL, same stuff. Type is going to be a string. And the way you use these parameters is again the reference function. Okay. So I'm going to say in here, I'm going to do a reference to my database URL. And then this is going to be a reference to my login level. So if you see now, it's a little bit better. I can at least pass something in my file, replace the variables, and still keep my resources the same on all environments. So if I run this now,
There are some errors.
yeah, that's YAML actually. YAML doesn't like this way, so I can just do it next line. But it won't have an issue. Let's try that out. It won't have any issues. It's just a YAML thing. What's that? Oh yeah, okay. Is it that? I don't know.
Compiler will complain.
Maybe. Okay, yeah. So we have that, and now we do a package. I'm just going to clear this out. Let's say you do a deploy. Now in deploy, this is the place where you'll have to specify those parameters now. Which are the parameters you want to use when you deploy that? Because this is where it will resolve these variables now, the parameter section. Okay. So this is where I'm going to say parameters, and this is nothing but a key value pair. So you can take that name, put it here, and say equals to. Let's say this is a warning. Let's say you want to deploy to a production grade and you want to keep it as warning. Once again, sorry, in here in my Lambda, I have this as debug. So we want this to change to warning when we deploy this change, right? That's the goal. And then the next one is database URL. Going to say it's going to be a, let's say, a test, nothing else.
So Kush, here the database URL and login level, they're mandatory, right? We need to pass them.
Yes, now you'll have to pass them.
So we can make it optional as well, right?
So to make it optional, another property is that you can use a default value here.
Okay.
Then you can make it as optional.
Got it.
Another way is that in logging level, let's say you want to put some checks on the values that are passed. So usually if logging level is a good example. So let's say you want to do that, then you can say you have to allowed values is another property that you can use, which is a certain array of the valid values. So it's a info or debug. So if you pass something else, then it will complain. All right. So, oops, I think it's parameter overrides. Sorry. Okay, so I'm just going to do jump deploy. Help. Okay, did I miss something? Maybe a typo. Oh, yeah, parameter. Oh, there. Okay, I'm just going to change that. Logging level 1 is not in valid format. Why is that? Like parameter key and parameter pair.
Comma is missing, I think.
Oh yeah.
After one, you need to give a comma.
Yeah. No, it's not that. Just that format is key pair name, my key. Okay, that's what we did, right? One. Okay, let's just quickly check the documentation parameters. I'm sorry. Parameters data type to allow values description. Yep, that's what we have. So we have one. Price properties, parameter overrides. It must look something like parameter. Oh, okay. Okay.
Replacing database URL.
Yeah, I think that's the reason, probably. Maybe just do that. I don't know. Maybe it's that.
While passing the parameter there, you are not putting
Sorry, what was that?
in parameters override logging level what
Uh-huh.
for the database URL there should be space.
Yeah,
How
even I feel
will
that should be a
comma
space. But I feel that's something else. See,
comma separated.
keep a name.
One is not valid format.
Okay.
The format is parameter key equal to okay and comma separated only. That is correct.
It's like or keep a name because my
So is it like you will have to mention parameter key equal to
no,
logging level and
it's either that or either or. Sorry, I it's just I think some typo is it's either or. So either you have to specify this way or you have to specify this way.
so I think you have to give parameter key equal to logging level
And
and then
then
parameter
parameter
value equal to
like this.
one or something like that.
It does is you can do both the formats. So either that format or you can give this format, which is essentially
Okay,
like
yeah.
this, which is what
Space what we did here.
right. Anyway, let's try that. Parameter key equals level, the value equals warning. Again, the key equals
That is comma separated. I think so.
let's try, oops. Okay, yeah, maybe that was it.
But why was it not working? Like
No, I think it's not that. I think it's the logging level that is an issue. Um,
Or
let me just remove this, see what happens. Because logging level database, because I think it didn't. This is non-alpha numeric, right? That's why it's. That's the reason. I think it was because of the allowed values. Then I'm going to build again. Okay. Let's try this again. Nope. It's not able to detect logging level for some reason. Why is that? Oh yeah, this. No, is it? No, sorry. My bad. It's the same thing. Anyway, in the interest of time, let's just take that. Anyway, I just need to explain what I need to explain to you guys. For now, I'm just going to do this and did I save that? Yeah, okay.
to remove that parameter logging level.
Yeah. Okay. Database URL is non-alphanumeric.
it's comparing about database URL. I think that underscore is the issue. Can you remove that
Yeah,
underscore?
maybe.
So only the name is alphanumeric.
Yeah, you're right.
Yes.
Oops. Okay, we didn't build that again. That's why. I think that was the issue. because it was referring the temporary that was created in .aws directory. There we go.
Yeah.
All right. So while that happens, because couple of things that we need to do. So now we have your parameters where you can define your parameters. You can pass in extra information or maybe input to your template and use that to the reference property, right?
Yeah, Kush, one thing.
Yeah.
So we changed the underscore in line number 4, but in ref we are not changing it.
You
We have to change it there as well, right?
Right. Good catch. So yeah, it did complain.
one place. Okay, that is a built-in property.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, so this is one way that you can declare the parameters and you can declare them over here. But let's say that this is just one example, right? This is just one environment variable, couple of them. Let's say you have a huge file and you have a lot of environment variables, a lot of other references, a lot of other things that are very dependent to your, environment, right? Or maybe a target AWS region, or it could be anything, right? That so if you use just this, then you'll end up with like 150 parameters, which is again unmanageable, right? So for that, another option is, and
Can you
option is
create a file, another file creating?
either you do that, or another option you can have a mappings. So mappings is essentially a map of properties, any property that you define. So this is one way to do that. One is the parameters. Another is if you define everything in the mapping, and by mapping I'll show you what how this works. So you define a map. So map is essentially, let's say I want to say my map is going to be my env variables is a map. Okay. And in here I'm saying now a log level. Sorry. In here I'm saying my dev region should have a log level of debug. It should have a database URL of let's say localhost, for instance, something like that. Let's say my staging should have this and production should have this. Staging, let's say info is fine, and production just to keep it as a 1. Okay, this could be, let's say prod whatever test. Okay, so this is like a map I've created. So in here you will have those 10, 15 or whatever 100 variables over here, but at least you have now one place to define everything, like all the mappings and the mapping, and you want to specify the parameters. So you don't have to, your command is not going to change a lot. But how do we use these, right? I'm just going to quickly go to terminal and see if that worked. So yeah, that worked. And if I quickly go to function now, my Lambda function, if I do a function refresh configuration, and there we go. We've changed it to test and info. Okay. So next is the mappings. So how do you use these mappings in your resources, right? So for that, we have some other intrinsic functions, and this would be a good time to go to intrinsic functions. I go to template anatomy, and then I have my sorry, okay, I'm just going to
which is the better way, creating a map or another file where we'll keep all environment pick from there?
then you'll have to import it externally, that file. And I'm not sure if you can import external file into a template, but this map is going to define that at least you don't have your CLI, you don't have so many things in the CLI. Because parameter override something, you'll have to specify in the CLI.
No, I got idea, but that will be one file which will have all the environment related.
Right, but
data.
I'm not sure if you can import something inside as a file inside a SAM template. Maybe I'll have to do some research, or you can do it yourself. But I'm not sure if you can
Okay.
have an external file being imported as part of a SAM template. You can say it. All right. There are a bunch of functions that the Cloudformation provides. So far, we have been using the ref without even knowing that we are using that function. The ref is what we have been using so far for references between different things in the template, right? Um, so now we can use the we can use a find in map. If you see, there is a find in map here. Yeah, in here, which is going to say I want to find something in my map that I've created in the mappings. Okay. So by that I mean that here I want to say my logging level. This is supposed to be intrinsic function, which is find and start with an exclamation. Find in map. Right. It takes an array. The first parameter is the map name, which is the environment variables. The next one is the name of the key. The third one is your property. All right. This is how you define your map. And similarly, if I do that with the database URL, it's going to do this, and then this is going to be database URL. Right. Again, dev is being hard coded, so I cannot use a template for anything that is stage or production. Right. Again, this so we can even have some other intrinsic functions inside an intrinsic function. In this case, if I say dev, I want to take it from parameter. So if I want to define this in a way that I just want to say, I want to deploy this template to this target environment and resolve all their dependencies internally. So all I have to do is in my command line, I'll just have to say, I'm going to say my target environment is going to be a type of string, and my allowed values are going to be dev. Essentially, these names of your key. If I do that, all I have to do is inside my find in map, I can do a ref now. Ref of target env. So now, if you see, now my template is very configurable. Right, all I have to do is this is the only unknown which is there in my template. Rest everything is resolved within the template itself. And this helps if I'm building a CI/CD. That all I have to do is in the template, in the deploy command, I just have to specify a parameter override, which is my target environment where I want to deploy. Okay, and there we go. Let's try that out. Okay. And now instead of database URL, I'm going to say my parameter override is going to be target env equals, and let's try prod, for instance. So now if you see, parameter overrides will only have one property, prod, and the template is going to resolve this log level in database URL through a map. It's going to go into the environment variables. It's going to get the target environment, which is essentially the key. In our case, this is going to go here, and then it's going to take these two values. So in our console, we should see environment variables change to warning and prod test. Again, what is this? Mapping attributes must contain. Okay, mapping attributes also is the same thing. I'm going to remove that. Remove that. Remove that. Database URL. That. Let's try quickly one again. Okay, so it's going on. Let's see, because I think we're short of time. I want to show you two more things. One is mappings we have done, parameters we have done, but there are two things which are missing from this example. One is the production grade code usually does not have just an index.js, right? You have your imports, you have your node.js dependencies, right? You don't
you can show those two things because we started a little late, so we can.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. I still target to finish this off in 10-15 minutes, so let's see how it goes. But okay, that's fine, thanks. So essentially what we need is we need a um, if this is a node application, that's why we need an npm package JSON file. If it's a Java application, we need a pom XML or a build.gradle file, something like that, right? I'm quickly going to create that file, JSON. And here I'm going to say, instead of that, let's just install some dependencies through CLI. Okay, so it has successfully updated the stack. Let's quickly head over to Lambda and functions, going back. The reason I'm going back is I don't see a refresh here. But there we go. We have warning and production. So you can use those mapping section to define your map and then use the references to resolve those references. And the next one is that in a production application, we usually don't have this. And then because we have a SAM build, so we'll see how SAM build can resolve those node dependencies as well, which is again something that is unique to SAM. Well, I'm just going to say, I'm going to say this is the npm init. Package name is fine, version is fine, description let be. Let's say this is src index.js. Test command I don't need. Repository it's okay. Keyword is fine. Author doesn't matter. And there we go. So we'll have a package JSON creator. Oops. Oh, okay. Sorry. Yeah, it is okay. All right. Now we have package JSON file, and in here I'm just going to quickly say my dependencies are going to be, let's say I'm to user dot env. Oops. All right, we have that. I'm not going to run npm install here, but let's see what SAM does. If it detects the package JSON file, and in my template I've specified that, I'm just going to put that inside source. Okay, so inside source are my source, the JS file, my package JSON, and in my template file I've specified that my code URI starts with src. So let's see what it does when it does the package JSON. I'm going to clear this out. Also now let's do a debug into SAM build to see what it does internally. All right, so it has build succeeded, but if you see, scroll up, earlier we were having that error, the package JSON not found, if you remember, right? In this case, it has detected. So first it starts with what is the runtime, and then it will internally determine what is the builder it's supposed to use. If it's a Java Gradle, it will probably look for a build .gradle. This is going to use for an event pom XML. And node is going to use, we don't have a webpack, but essentially this is also inbuilt into SAM build command. If you use webpack for packaging, that it will pack your application after resolving node dependency. So these are the builders that it does. If you see, first of all, it will do the pack. If you have an npmrc file, it will use that to resolve your dependencies. And then it will run the npm install, right, into your AWS SAM build and clean up npmrc. So now if I go to this directory, build demo lambda function, you now have your node modules here, .env lib, which is usually what is the case in a production application, right? You also need the dependencies along with your source code. We are not going to use webpack today, but at least you get the idea that it is inbuilt as part of the SAM build command to even use a packager. So this is very unique to SAM, which is something I wanted to demonstrate. And another option is, let's say that now, if I just take this, it is always going to deploy, and you'll see that node modules will be there in the console, but before we doing that, I just want to show you another thing, which is another command to test your infrastructure locally, something that I added in my slide, right? That you can use SAM to test your infrastructure locally. And how do you do that? Because for now, what we have been doing is we are going to SAM deploy, we are doing SAM build, SAM package and SAM deploy, and then testing everything through either API gateway or in the console, right? But what if I want to make a change? I want to test it locally before even going to AWS. Like I don't want to go to AWS at all, right? You can do that. SAM build is already done. So the next command, anyway, the build is all. I'll just run this again. So if you see now we have more builders. Earlier we didn't have so many, but because we have package JSON, it has done all these things. If you see now it has saying that you can use SAM local to invoke your Lambda function. SAM local is the command through which you can locally debug and test your application. A disclaimer, you'll need Docker to be running in order to use SAM local, because essentially it will download the image and then create a container in your Docker. So for SAM local, you'll need a running Docker instance, okay, which I already have, but just wanted to call it out. So if I do SAM local, there are two things we can do. Not two, three things. You can invoke an individual Lambda function, in which case all I have to do is, if I go into index.js, I'll have to mock this event, right? And then you can test the code. You can start the API, so it will internally give you an endpoint where you can test your API, okay? And it's going to start the Lambda function as well. These are the three things. So we are going to check the start API first. So I'm going to do SAM local start API, and you can see it's running on now localhost 3000. Done. And then the path we have on our API is orders, right? Hit that, and there we go. We have 200 and get method call, which is essentially what is in our source code, right? Quickly going back to our index.js, let's say get method call again. I change that. All right. A SAM build my code, local start API, and then again going back to our hit, and there we go. So this is how we can test your changes locally through SAM local command. Another thing is, if you don't have API, right, then this command is not going to help. So there are only a handful of testing that you can do. One is a Lambda function, one is an API. But in order to do that, let's quickly do a SAM help. So in order to do the Lambda thing, right, you don't know what is this event object, right? It could be an SQS event, it could be API gateway event. So you'll have to format like you don't know what all things can come from that event object, right? Because it's dynamic and it's not. So for that, they give you this generate event parameter. So SAM local generate event, and here I can say I want to, again, if you do help, you'll be able to see a lot of other command options that it has. In our case, the event is going to be API gateway, which is specified here, right? I do that. Oh yeah, and then we don't have an authorizer, right? We don't have an authorizer, we just have a proxy. So I'm going to say API proxy. And there we go. Now we have the entire event spit it out. I take that. Copy. I'm going to create a directory here, say test. Inside test, I'm going to say resources. I'm going to say get event.json. Paste that here, and then probably change your, this is the resource which is orders. Path to the resource is going to be /orders, right? I think there's one more place in here. The HTTP method is going to be get, right? resource path is going to be orders. All right. So you can use this event to mock our testing. There's another thing that you need is an environment, because we have an environment. You even need an environment file to specify the environment variables, right? So for that, I'm just going to in the resources again, env.json. This file is again a JSON formatted. You have to start specifying first of all your name of the Lambda function that you want to test. If you have multiple, you can use the same env file for multiple things. And in here, I want to mock this log level. Oops. For testing purposes, let's say I want to do this as fatal, for instance. Okay. And I want to say my database URL is going to be local. By using these two files, now if I do a SAM local, invoke is going to be the function, not start API. We are going to use invoke. Invoke, I want to invoke, sorry, this Lambda function. And there are two parameters. One is the event that I want to pass in is going to be under my test. Resources get event, and the environment is going to be test resources env. If I do that, it's going to start a container. And then if you see now, because I printed the environment variables, you can see now it has printed log level
logging
fatal.
database URL.
And this is the output that I have from my Lambda function to API, return back to API. Essentially, this is the return statement. So you can test your function locally, make sure it is working correctly. For instance, if you have API gateway integrated and you change the format of your response, right? You can test this locally and see that you're still having the same response, or you may have to go back to API.
Kush, here like we can only test locally this thing API gateway and Lambda function, nothing else. Right?
For now, yes. For now, you can only do two things.
Okay.
Yes. Maybe they'll add more stuff, and it's an open source, so feel free to do that if you're interested. But yeah, this is how you can do. So there's something which is very unique to SAM that you can do that. You can't do that in Cloudformation. And there's the other two things that I want to show you, that you can test it locally, debug, and you can essentially run your function, run your API locally before you deploy this to cloud. Okay. So we are short of time. Actually, I wanted to create a CI/CD, but I think that's anyway out of the scope of this session. But I wanted to show you that if you commit a change, that you can trigger a CI. But essentially, it's the same thing. I'll probably have three steps. One is the SAM build in my CI, one is the SAM package, and one is the SAM deploy, which is going to do the same thing. But the idea is the same. That
yeah, basically when you commit to Git, to trigger that pipeline.
You can trigger the pipeline. You can do that. But these are some of the things that locally you can invoke, very, very powerful. You don't have to go to AWS all the time. Mappings are again something that if you want to make extremely, configurable templates, you can use that. Another thing is if you want to use the same template to deploy to a different AWS environment, you don't even have to specify that, or you want to just deploy a resource to the target environment in which this template is being deployed. Like you don't know which environment it is, for instance. For instance, I want to create a Lambda function. I want to make sure that my entire infrastructure and everything is in the same environment where I'm running the template. So for that, if I go to intrinsic function, there is a function substitution. You can substitute string values in here. And they provide us a way that there are some pseudo parameters that you can use. So if I just do a $AWS region, for instance, let's say my database URL, I don't want to do it from the web, but let's say it's https dynamodb dot ap south 1 dot amazon aws.com /demo. That's my path. All right. But let's say I want to don't do it from the map itself. I can always do like AWS colon region. But if you do that, this is no longer a string. So you have to say, I want to now use the substitute function. Yep. If you do that, then this is again one way that you can use the pseudo parameters to substitute. And even if you don't want to use pseudo parameter, you can still use the substitute function if you want to use something from the reference from this template itself. If you have defined a variable over here, something, let's say when you want to substitute, you can do that as well using the sub function.
Got it.
I think we're about time, and these are some of the things I want to demonstrate as part of this session. Yeah. So, any questions up till this point that we have covered? So, we have covered how we can build your template, how you can define relationships between the template, how you can make template more configurable through input parameters, and make template very generic through mappings. And we have seen how you can interact with the template through the CLI through some of the commands, and local testing and debugging through SAM local.
I think it's pretty clear. So it was a good session, very useful for me.
Okay. Thanks, Kush. Thanks to everyone, in fact, who attended this session. We'll be sharing the recording soon now. I'll be closing the call.
All right.
And feedback, Rishabh, I think it'll be useful for you to.
Yeah.
I'll
I'll feel it.
All right. Thanks. Bye.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thanks,
Bye.
Kush. Thanks all. Bye bye.